Well, good morning again, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is Thomas Carlson from Knowledge Point, and I'm also being joined by Peter Routledge and Lindsay Routledge from the Whitefrog team, and also my colleague Natalie Davis at Knowledge Point. The purpose of this webinar is to give an introduction to the Whitefrog team, for you to hear a bit more about how they work with Autodesk training content. We will also include a demo of their material as well as the My Livebook tool that's being used to provide access to e-learning or e-books for Whitefrog. The way we will run through this is after this very short intro from me, I'm going to hand over to Peter so that he can talk a bit more about Whitefrog and give you some background on their company and their team. We'll then hand over to Natalie from Knowledge Point to show you the My Livebook tool. That will be a live demo on the screen, so just showing you how that platform is built up and how you can leverage and access the Whitefrog material through that. And following on to that, Peter will come back and we'll have a slight conversation, but also a demo of the BIM virtual project that we will be talking a bit more about today. There will also be time for questions during this call, so feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function that you will find in the Zoom bar. We have muted the phone lines for the time being because we're recording the session for those who couldn't join us this morning. But if you type in your question, then I promise that we will have time towards the end of the call to address any question that you send our way, essentially. And then to round all of this off, we will also have kind of an outro just to let you know how you could access the material and use this in your training courses. But with that said, without any further ado, I think we'll kick off. And Peter, thank you for joining us this morning, and I'll hand over to you to give us an intro about Whitefrog and how you work with Autodesk training material.
Super, thanks, Thomas. Thank you very much for that.
Would you want to share your screen?
Yes. Yep.
Yep, I'll stop sharing and then the control is yours.
Are you able to see that now, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'll try and give a brief sort of background into the Whitefrog and some of the thinking and development behind our learning content. We've been around in evolving construction over 40 years, and the last 25 years predominantly around 3D technology. And where we started was working with a very large global organization that was looking at BIM implementation around 14 years ago. And what was important for them was that they had consistency across all their regions of the world. And that became very clear that with BIM, we had to establish what was going to be the language and the jargon. So before we could go teaching people, and it wasn't Peter's version of BIM, as opposed to anybody else's, it had to have some background and some credibility. So I became a member of the BSI, British Standards Institute, B555 committee, which back in those days was looking very much at the concept of standards and regulations and best practice and guidance around BIM. My colleague Paul Waddy, he was a member of the AEC UK BIM Standards Committee, as it was called back in those days. We didn't really have any standards, so this was a group of 20 large practitioners that came together and agreed on a naming convention and agreed some basic rules on how to talk to each other and how to use this technology. So that was our kind of background, that we realized it had to have credibility based upon best practice in the marketplace, and that everybody, of course, learns differently. What's easy for some is possibly difficult for others. And people are in different places on the learning curve. So that made us think that, as it wasn't a case of one size fits all, we needed to look at training that could be modular and flexible, so that we could have a course tailored to suit the actual individual requirements. Another thing that we obviously stumbled across was the fact that it had to cater for both face-to-face training and distance learning. So we set about some sort of 7-8 years ago, converting our traditional face-to-face learning content and turning that into a more online version. But once more, we had to retain consistency, because the critical aspect of implementing BIM on a large scale is this consistency. We've been involved too many cases around the world with near critical failures in some projects where this consistency and methodology hasn't been established. So we set out with this company and rolling out BIM implementation internationally on a train the trainer method. And it became pretty obvious to us that we needed very robust training resources, so that when we left people in different parts of the world, they could maintain that same high level of quality that the organization required. So over the years, we developed a lot of the trainer resources. And this is typically our kind of business model, is developing resources for the trainer. And on the other side, for the delegate and the student, we obviously have resources for him. So we developed resources for both sides of the classroom, whether it was going to be face-to-face or whether it was going to be as an online e-learning. And today, our partners are international and cater from students at school, from the ages of 11 upwards, through to universities and higher education, and into obviously professional practice. And that's a bit of an overview of Whitefrog, where we've been. We are award-winning. We have won a number of awards. We've recently, in the past few years, won 2 innovation awards. We have a CITB award we won last year, and we've won a number of awards from RICS and BIM for SME. So I think what we've managed to do is encapsulate best practice, standards where available. So we've moved through the PASs now into the ISOs, and we've aligned our teaching resources and our learning to be focused on best practice in the marketplace. So we rather talk about what is the best practice method of doing something, rather than just the features and the functionality of the software. And that's kind of where Whitefrog is today.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. And as a next step in this call, so we will obviously, Peter will be back shortly and talk more specifically about, titles, etc., that are available as part of, the Whitefrog library. But before we get into that, I think one thing that I know is important to Whitefrog, it's important to you as training organization, and it's certainly important to us here at Knowledge Point, is to be able to access materials in a flexible manner and choose the format that's right for the particular customer, but also the particular project you may be running. And the Whitefrog material will be available to purchase as printed training guides, of course, but we will also be providing them as ebooks through the My Livebook platform and as self-paced e-learning to the Whitefrog Academy, to kind of give you as the training centers full flexibility of delivering this content. What we thought would be useful to do is to show you how these tools would work and how the material is set up in them. So as a next step, I'd like to ask Natalie Davis, who's working here at Knowledge Point, to give us an overview of My Livebook, if we start there, so the ebook version, and just showing you how that can be leveraged, both for your own teams, but of course in terms of making the content available to your delegates. So Natalie, if I stop sharing my screen and give you control, then the stage is yours, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. Morning, everyone. So this is a short demonstration on the My Livebook tool, which has been selected to deliver some of the Whitefrog materials. So once you receive an access code, which is how you will be granted access to the My Livebook content, you would navigate to mylivebook.com and sign up for an account. This is a very simple process. You would just provide the information that you can see on the screen here. We ask for date of birth information for GDPR reasons, and that's because different countries have different regulations with regards to how old you need to be to sign up for an account. We only store the date and month of birth until the user turns 18, and then we would only store the year. So if you follow that process, you'll receive an activation email. You just click on a link and then you can access your account. Alternatively, you can sign up with single sign-on using your Facebook, Google or Microsoft account. So it's just very quick to sign up. So I'm going to log in with my account. Now, I mentioned that you would receive an access code if you order the My Live Book version of the materials. So the first thing you would do is select Add Content and pop the code in there. You'd then say Add Content, and the content associated with that code would then appear in your library. So you can see here that I have a couple of the Whitefrog titles in my library here. So I'll just open one of those. So the content will open in a separate tab of your web browser. Now, the first time you open the book, it will open on the first page. Any subsequent times, it will open on the last page you were reading. So I've taken a look through this book and I got to page 10. But had it been the first time I'd opened the book, it would open on the front cover page here. Now, you can use the next and previous page buttons to either side of the book to navigate through the content. Or alternatively, we have the table of contents section here, which is quite handy if you're in a classroom environment because you can jump to specific pages of interest very quickly. So if I want to jump to page 7, for instance, I can jump there and it will take me to that part. Now, while you're in the content, you can use a number of different features. So I can select text and make a highlight. So I select the text of interest and I select highlight. And I can then make a highlight, and the highlight I've made will then appear to the right hand side in my annotation section for me to quickly reference at a later date. I can also add comments against my text, so I do so by selecting add comment and selecting the appropriate colour. Now you'll notice that these are called Carmine Red, etc. Now these are personalisable per user, so I can put this as revise, for instance. And everything that is purple, I know I need to revise for exam. Now what I can do is I can colour code all of my annotations and then I can view and filter by anything that I need to revise, and it will just filter down that revise category there, so I can very quickly navigate to the parts of the book that are needed. Let me just view everything. Now, as well as adding comments and highlights against the content, I can also type notes directly onto the page. So I do this by selecting type note, adding a box and adding a typed note. This can be reformatted. So I can make it a different colour, bold. And then I can drag and drop it to the place that I'd like it to appear on the page, and just clicking out of that box will save it. And again, that will add to the right-hand side of my annotations here. So the final feature that you can do is you can insert an image. So if there's some additional information that you've been provided, or if there's something that you think would be helpful that you'd like to add to the content, what you can do is you can select insert. What that will allow you to do is upload any images that you've taken. So all you need to do is get them onto your PC, and then you can drag and drop or upload them. And then you can just add an image. It's just an image I added earlier, but if you had a picture of a whiteboard or something like that, you could upload that to that section. Now the content is completely searchable. So if I search for sketch, for instance, it will let me know anywhere that appears within the book. I may have chosen a word that appears in several sections, so it may take a while, but I can see that it appears on this page, and it will let me know anywhere that it appears within the content. You'll notice at the top here that we have a sketch has appeared, and it lets me know anywhere where it appears. I can flick through page 9, etc. You'll notice here that I have English selected. What we can do is we can change the translation of the tool. So if I select Spanish, what it will do is it will change the tool translation, but it will not change the content, because obviously the content is the content written by Whitefrog, and a translation tool wouldn't necessarily translate it correctly. Got that back to English. We also have a chat support tool available for you. So if you have any queries at all, we have this chat support tool available. And that's available 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. You can pop your information in there and they can answer any queries. How do I redeem a code? How do I make a note? I'm having problems signing up, etc. And there's someone there that can help you with your queries. Now, finally, if we just go back to the home page here, you'll notice that we have a My Annotations tab. Now, this is handy because it allows you to filter through all comments, all highlights, all notes, and all images, and also by your color-coded references. So we could color code, search for everything that's revised, and then throughout all of your content, it would bring up everything that you need to revise, and clicking on it would take you directly to that part within the content. So people find that quite handy. I know with printed books, I've had lots of different color tabs put in my print. This kind of emulates that, but in the digital copy, so that you can, color code things accordingly. So a couple of security features to mention. You can only log in from one IP location at a time on the web and up to 2 devices, because we do have it available to download on the iOS App Store and Google Play for Android. All of the functionality is exactly the same, and you can use the apps offline. So once you've signed up and you've downloaded your content to the apps, you can use the content offline, and then the next time you log into the web with Wi-Fi access, any notes or annotations or anything like that that you've done will all sync up, so you don't lose where you are in the book and you don't lose any of your annotations there. So that's a brief overview of the My Live Book tool. If anybody has any questions at all or anything that they'd like me to run over again.
Thank you, Natalie. When preparing or when sending out the invite for the webinar, I actually received the question over email, so I might just jump in here and ask that. So everything you've shown us now, it is correct, right, that these are features that the instructor would have, but certainly also the attendees, so the course delegates, can do all of these with the annotations and tracking, etc.
Yes, that's correct. So this is one tool used by the instructor and by the end users. So all the functionality will be exactly the same for every user. Okay,
perfect. And I guess also that the training partner that orders this from us would get codes for each user, right? So that they distribute that to the end user rather than us doing it.
Correct. So the orders would be placed on the online order tool, which I believe the participants already have access to. And then they would receive one code per user that they would then need to distribute onto that end user. And the end user would then sign up for an account and redeem their code.
Perfect. There's also a question here in the chat about the validity or the runtime of these codes. So one of our partners has ordered some other materials that was delivered to My Live Book with a 12-month expiry on it. Is that the same for this material as well?
Yeah, so there's a 12-month expiry period. So all users will have access to 12 months once they've redeemed the code. And there's an initial 3-month redemption period. So once you receive the code, you must use it within 3 months. Otherwise, it will expire. And the reason we have those lengths on there is so that the content isn't floating around forever that could be redeemed in 5 years, for instance.
Yes, no, excellent. And and what we should say as well, especially with the 3 months redemption. So when you place an order in the order tool, it's usually a matter of, I would say, a day's turnaround time. So you don't have to, pre-order too far advance of the training course. You have quite a lot of flexibility there, so you don't have to run the risk of, purchasing lots of codes that might end up expiring. So you can do this in real time.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, and to follow up question here. Yes, so the validity expires after 12 months. So the ebook is available to the user 12 months after they have redeemed the code initially.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So it's just a follow up in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
All right. I don't see any other questions right now, but I know, Natalie, you're staying online. So if anyone thinks of any questions, then feel free to type them in, and we can always come back to them towards the end of the session. But thank you very much for the demo.
No problem at all.
And I'll
stop
sharing my screen. So the intention with this was, as I said, to give you an overview of one of the options. We'll obviously not demo the physical or the printed book, because I think that makes that is what it is basically. But we will now wanted to do now is kind of bring Peter back and kind of talk more in detail about the content. And we have decided to focus. Obviously, Whitefrog has an extensive catalog, as you already saw in maybe on Natalie's screen. They're covering the major Autodesk software products. We wanted to hone in really on the BIM space and something that's called the virtual project. So we'll learn more about that. But I think maybe just to pick up on some of the questions we had before the webinar is that, so Peter, you obviously in your intro talked a bit about Whitefrog's background, etc. But one question I've had from a partner here was that, like as you know, the Autodesk training centers have a selection of different authors and vendors to choose from when they build their training courses. So what would you say are kind of the USPs, or what sets Whitefrog your material apart? What are some of the main things that you would highlight to our partners?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I suppose one of the first one was, as I mentioned earlier, that the courseware itself, the learning content, it was so important that there was a joined up methodology across the range of products. There was no point teaching one form of BIM to structural engineers, a different form of BIM, if you'd like, to architects and to building services guys. So we had to agree on conventions and guidance and best practice, and hence that involvement from the very beginning with the rules of engagement, if you'd like. What is BIM and what does that mean to the different players? And on the back of that, it became equally as important to create learning content that was aligned to that. So delegates and students going through these courses learn the best practice ways about how to use the software. Not necessarily different functionality, but using it in practical tasks and applications that industry told us was best practice. And I think that was kind of one of the key differentiators we found in the early days. I think Autodesk, by their own rights, talk about buttonology. And I think we've all been down that route many years ago of pressing buttons after buttons after buttons and thinking, I've pressed 50 buttons, where am I going on this journey? You tend to focus on buttonology and not on the actual task. And that was something that we aimed to stop. We wanted people finishing these courses to be armed with the information to go straight back to work and apply that learning. And the feedback from that has been really good from our clients. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And if we then follow on from that and kind of maybe hone in a bit more on the virtual project, so what we wanted to focus on in your demo as well, but can you give some initial background on this? So what is the concept? Where has it come from? How in terms of developing this out?
Yeah, so again, in the early days of BIM, to garner interest around the world, I think A-Site sponsored these Build Earth Live competitions. I'm sure many of the people watching this will remember them. And the team up in Northumbria, from Northumbria University, with BIM Academy and others, I think they won the first 2 or 3 of these Build Earth Live competitions. And what they were was a team of people, a team of professionals were given a design brief. And the challenge was within 48 hours, you had to submit your project. So this involved several groups of people from architects, structural, civils, MEP, sustainability, carbon energy efficiency, all coming together, cost engineers, and working on a project to deliver it back to the body that was now going to assess. And it was a real challenge, and there was some terrific learning came out of that, because you had to now apply BIM in a very, very live environment on a real sort of project, if you'd like. And the findings of that were fantastic for those involved. However, there was no real learning came out of it. So Whitefrog, together with Northumbria University, decided to distill and disseminate that information and create learning content. And that was really the background of where Whitefrog's virtual project course began. It was looking at the learning outcomes from those very successful competitions. And another key thing for us was to also align it at this time to what were the UK government task group. They identified certain learning outcomes they thought important in terms of education. And that was aligned with the BIM Academic Forum, which was about 30 universities that formed this forum, BAF, to look at what they considered that academics needed to teach to be effective learning outcomes. So together with Northumbria, we mapped both of those learning outcomes into a virtual project to ensure that we hit those goals and objectives.
Oh, excellent. And I guess given the close alignment with academia there, but would you say, so who is this course for? Is it also aimed at, the working professional, so to speak? And
yeah, absolutely. It's ideal for anybody that's working within information within the construction supply chain. So whether it's client side, design side, or construction side, or even operations and maintenance, it's targeted at anyone that has to handle information in a BIM environment. So what we look at, we talk about a BIM simulation course, and that's exactly what it is. It's to give participants an overview of not only the workflow, the ISO workflow, but also all the relevant documentation where they fit into that workflow. So someone who's maybe involved at the construction stage, wanting to know some information, should it have been maybe attached to the model, he would know what document and where to go and search for it and whose responsibility that was. So whether it's project teams, designers, planners, constructors, or the operational team, it's a really good course that provides everybody a holistic view, if you like, of a simulated project.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And I guess what everyone who's listening to this is excited about learning more about is what the actual, so what does the course include, and the building blocks. And I know you're going to show us just in a moment, but can you talk a little bit about that as well? What type of assets and tools do you have?
Yeah, so it all began from I suppose it was a face-to-face delivery course. We used to run it over about 3 days. But the idea is that this is not, obviously because of the people that will be attending this, they're not necessarily the technology users. So that's something to stress very early on, that this is not a technology training course. What we do is focus on the BIM process, the workflow, and as I said, the documents and standards. However, we use small bits of the software, things like Revit and Navisworks, to reinforce the process. So everybody gets to understand what the designer might be doing, what the design manager may be doing, what the planner may be doing. And that's kind of the objective, is awareness between the team. So where we start is with the EIR. We start at the very beginning. We tend to follow the REBA, Plan of Works. So we follow the diagram as adopted in ISO now, and we work our way through those various stages. And at all times, we reinforce what each participant should be looking out for. What are these key documents? Where do they come in? And what's their purpose? So the course ultimately provides you an opportunity to be able to work through a BIM project in a simulation environment without having to go out and maybe try this on a live project and incurring costs.
Excellent. No, I think that sounds very interesting, and I would assume that aligns very well with, I know it aligns very well with a lot of the work that our partners are doing. So, so should we move over to you showing a bit of the course in the environment? If I stop sharing again, and we'll
Yes,
share
sure.
your screen.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, all the courses have moved online some years ago. They're obviously kept up to date with latest changes in standards and technology. As you can see, our Virtual Project 2021 course was released a few months ago, which coincided with the transition from the PAS documentations, part 3 and 5, over to the ISOs. So the course material is right up to date with where we are. For students and delegates, once you are logged in, you would see all the available courses. You can also see which courses you've accessed lately, and you can have a look at my own courses as well as to see what I've actually got. And I've got a couple of things in here, and as we launch Virtual Project, I've just picked a module 3.1 to give you an example. It could be any range of these, so you would notice that the main Revits would be in there, along with Navisworks. You saw Inventor earlier, 3ds Max, and various other ones. But once we launch the Virtual Project course, it opens it up into our player. And the player has been reformatted for 2021 into a widescreen, much more fashionable, I suppose, format. And it comes with the usual things you'd expect to see, that you can play this on a phone designed for a pad or a laptop. But ultimately, we follow the same sort of process of exactly what we do in the classroom. So in the classroom resources, we have a theory component, which you've seen in the My Live book. We have the practical part, which is now the exercise, which looks at it. So the theory is what we're looking at here. We then have the practical exercise to reinforce that theory. And to go with that, there is also videos of each of these practical exercises. So for students who are studying alone online, they can't get lost because they can always watch the video, and the video is of someone doing the exercise. And then at the end, they take an assessment. So to give you an idea, there's obviously audio on here, and as you're playing, you have a transcript. It's interesting. There's a transcript of the slides. And I'll just fire that through. And then we go to the next slide. And this is what I mentioned of as following the REBA digital plan of works. So this is taken now from the ISO, and we sort of start up here with the EIR, moving to a BIM execution plan, and moving all the way around. In module 3.1, design authoring, we're in this work stage here. We're kind of now moving from the project information model into production. So that's how we kind of stay on top of where we are. If we go down to the practical, in this particular exercise, we have a short exercise for architect, for the structural engineer, the MEP of the landscape. And again, learning objective here is just to show these people that the architect, for example, will be doing a very small, simple exercise. So in his case, he's going to place a few walls and a few doors. So I think there's something like 19 steps. Very, very simple, because it's not necessarily technology users, but it shows him what the architect is doing, and likewise for the structural engineer and the MEP. So we use the software, very light touch, but to give them a sense of what the actual design team would be doing. And as I mentioned, if they get lost, we would always have the video on hand that they can follow through step by step, also with an audio over the top of it. And then upon completion, they have an assessment. And it's a self-marking assessment. I will just go through it and see how lucky I can be. I don't know any particular answers, as you can see. I don't think it really matters. But the self-marking assessment is very useful to give feedback to the, I don't know. Very useful information to feed back directly into the system so management can see how you're progressing with your learning. So what we've managed to do is take exactly the same resources that you would have used in the classroom. If this was face-to-face, you'd be delivering the theory using the PowerPoint with a script. You would be using the practical for the students along with data sets to do the exercise. And you would also have videos that they could watch to ensure they don't get lost along the way. So going back to where I started earlier, very robust training resources. It takes a lot of pressure off the trainers and allows them to support people that, you know, we all know some don't move as fast as others in that training environment. So that's an overview of what the product looks like as you work through it in the viewer. And then obviously when we're back here in my courses, I would have a lot of things that I can go into in terms of badges, competencies. You could check on the grades of people and scores as they go through each grade. The general kind of things you'd expect to see in the learning management system. So again, just that you can print that out, bit of reinforcement back to management. And that's a little overview of what it looks like.
Excellent, thank you for that. And I think that gives a good overview of what's available. And if we summarize this, I think obviously what we wanted to share in this webinar is, as I alluded to in the beginning, that there is flexibility in terms of the formats and how you can leverage the content and the resources Whitefrog have. So virtual project looks great. You have the My Live book if you're doing more of that classroom model, but you want to give don't want to hand out a printed book, but you also have that printed book as well. So there's full flexibility in terms of how to leverage and deliver the content. If we're hoping that this sneak peek at the content has inspired you to take a more in-depth look, and what we're really pleased to announce here from Knowledge Point side is that with this collaboration that we've started with Whitefrog, is that we have the possibility to resell their titles exclusively to Autodesk Learning Partners in the EMEA territory. And we can offer a discount on the SR pricing that you would purchase this in the open market, so to say. And the way to access the titles and also see more information about the the specific titles and the content that's in it would be to log into the order tool. I believe that many of you may already have an account, so then it would be the same URL as you've used before, so autodesk.knowledgepoint.co.uk, and the same login as well. So we have updated all the Autodesk partner accounts so that you should see the Whitefrog titles. All you need to do is log in and search for that, and then you would see the full selection with a short description of each. And then as said, you would have the option to choose one of these delivery formats. If you don't have an account today or something is not working when you're trying to log in, then feel free to drop our help desk an email at alp-support@knowledgepoint.com, and then we'll organize an account for you or for one of your colleagues, for example, so that you can access the materials. But we are very pleased to be working together, and I think we will have more of these updates so that you can hear directly from Peter and his team about, as there's new content maybe is being added or we're showing other solutions. But with that said, we did say in the beginning as well that there would be some time for any Q&A and questions, and I've still kept the phone lines on mute, but feel free to use the Q&A button and also the chat tool. And I see that we already have a first question, which is related to the virtual project, and whether you can offer that or whether you can access that to the order tool. And yes, so this is part of the selection. What will happen once you purchase it is that, and Peter, you may have to correct me here, but I believe that Peter's team will then set you up with an access in the in the LMS system, basically, so that you can access this. So
that's correct. Yeah, they just need to place the order on the product and the year, provide an email address, and yes, we'll just provide them access to it. Knowledge Point will pass that information and forward it to us, and we'll set them up. And then, very similar to the My Live book, once registered, they normally have access for 12 months.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely think that this is a very nice tool. So that this is definitely worth considering. I think, especially with the breadth of and the choice you have to also incorporate into the classroom, as Peter already mentioned. Any other questions or comments from anyone? I'll just give you all the.
There's one thing to consider as well, Thomas, is the fact that having that flexibility of using this type of delivery to complement what you would normally do in the classroom is also another very useful way of working with it. That not everybody can make 3 days in the classroom, but they could possibly make 1 or 2 days and then still catch up with the other stuff in their own time in the virtual world. So
absolutely,
they complement. They give you that more flexibility. We hear about blended learning all the time, but it truly does give you that opportunity to blend a bit of face-to-face with online.
Absolutely, and I can imagine that's particularly relevant in these times that all of us have been going through in the last months, and maybe there's also an opportunity there to reuse, reuse another time or invite them again, I guess, to follow-up training if you do 1 day in or a follow-up.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of times when training is covers a theoretical topic, and to a greater extent, that's the kind of thing that we find delegates and students are quite comfortable just reading through that in their own time. You don't necessarily need an expensive trainer in the room for that. So you can kind of start to optimize your training time as well, and spending that on the real training input where the value is, not really just reading through theoretical stuff.
Absolutely. So there's been a couple of more questions come in while we were speaking there. So one is about localization. I guess, Peter, so it's specifically whether you have any localized content and specifically for French speakers?
Yes, we do. We work with a partner in France. So we have, I think, BIM, the introduction to BIM course that we have, that is definitely in French, and I think Revit, our Revit architecture course has also been translated into French. I think we have Revit architecture structure MEP. I think have all been translated into simplified Chinese as well, which is a rather unusual one. But yeah, we are busy with localization of the resource. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that's really good news. So then, and we can, if there are specific questions on that content, then feel free to drop us a note, and we'll kind of put you in touch, and so you can ask them.
Yeah, Lindsay will pick up with those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then there's another question. I don't think this is for you, Peter, but it's rather for us here at Knowledge Point. It's about the My Live book access level that we talked about. That a user code is valid for 12 months. So there's a question, or rather not a question, more of a feedback point that seems a bit short time, and I guess it's related to what kind of Natalie was saying in her demo is that we want to ensure that the content gets used, and also that there's, of course, regular updates that are happening, so new content gets added. But I know, I think I'm right in saying, Natalie, that we're currently reviewing that as well, right? That there might be a change.
We are reviewing that at the moment. It's just a 12-month lease at the moment, and obviously it is for the opportunity to purchase updates if there is any update to the content, you know, to make sure that the participants have the most up-to-date product available.
Exactly, but there may be a slightly different validity period very shortly, and this is related to the platform itself rather than the specific Whitefrog titles it's being taken. So, you know, I guess stay tuned from an update there potentially in the near future from us. And I see there's another feedback point on the same topics. I guess we're getting good feedback that does maybe need to be updated. But yes, there is a project underway to review that validity. So I currently do not see any other questions, but we've already had some really good questions. So I think just give it maybe another minute. But just to summarize here, so from our side, it's obviously that, you know, from Knowledge Point side, we're really happy to launch this collaboration with Whitefrog. The titles, all the titles in all of these formats are available in the order tool. So you can log in today if you have an existing account. And if you don't, then feel free to drop us an email and we'll get that set up and organized for you. Also, if you have specific questions on the content, then we can route it through the help desk email you see on the screen, and then we'll, if we here at Knowledge Point can't answer the specific question, I know I'm absolutely certain that Peter will jump in and help us in that respect.
Yeah, sure will.
Excellent. And I see there's one final question, whether we will offer hard copies rather than the ebooks for all the courses. And yes, so you have, so all the titles are available as a printed book or an ebook, or the virtual project is then the full you know, self-study / e-learning system. So you have a full selection and options to choose what's right for you and your customers.
Possibly worth considering as well that our trainer resources, you guys obviously have the option as well to purchase those through Knowledge Point. So.
Yes, good point. So that's also set up in the order tool so that you can have a look at those.
Particularly the face-to-face delivery. If the guys want the access to a trainer pack as well as hard copy books, that's all available through Knowledge Point.
Perfect. Well, at this point, I don't see any further questions. I think we'll maybe close here, but as said, feel free to drop any questions over email and we'll all be happy to answer those. And thank you again, Peter, for joining us, and Lindsay as well from Whitefrog. It's a pleasure to have you online, and we look forward to working together. And hopefully there will be many more questions that we can jointly work through together with the partners.
Fabulous, guys. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thank you for attending, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.